If you need to use your laptop, that's okay. Of course, physical book is nice because you can write notes in it like I do. But okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit, and then I want to say something when we get finished with this little argument. Remember, so Cephalus first makes the argument that, and Polemarchus takes up the discussion and says that justice is speaking the truth and giving to each what one is owed. Right? And then Polemarchus expands upon this and says, well, actually, justice is doing good to friends and doing harm to enemies. I think we talked about that, right?
Yeah, we talked about friends and enemies in regards to justice.
So Socrates and Polemarchus are continuing this discussion, and Socrates is kind of leading him in this argument in which he's trying to show Polemarchus that according to his idea, his conception of justice, doesn't seem to be a useful thing. And it doesn't seem to be something that just has to do with practicality in money matters or in practicality of safeguarding money. And so at 333, 10e, he says, then justice cannot be something excellent, can it, my friend, if it is only useful for useless things? But let's consider the following point. Isn't the person who's cleverest at landing a blow, whether in boxing or in any other kind of fight, also cleverest at guarding against it? Of course. And the one who is clever at guarding against disease is also cleverest at producing it unnoticed. That is my view, at any rate. And the one who is a good guardian of any army is the very one who can steal the enemy's plans and dispositions. Of course. So whenever someone is a clever guardian of something, he is also clever at stealing it. It seems so. So if a just person is clever at guarding money, he must also be clever at stealing it. So the argument suggests, at least. And then Socrates makes a strange conclusion. It seems then that a just person has turned out to be a kind of thief. You probably got that idea from Homer, for he loves Autolycus, the maternal grandfather of Odysseus, whom he describes as better than everyone at stealing and swearing false oaths. According to you, Homer and Simonides, then, justice seems to be some sort of craft of stealing, one that benefits friends and harms enemies. Isn't that what you meant? I don't know about you. I think Socrates is making a bad argument here. Right? He says, look, if you're good at treating disease, then you're also good at poisoning people. If you're good at guarding money, you're also good at stealing it. Right? And then he says, well, according to you then, it seems a just person has turned out to be a kind of thief. Well, that doesn't follow. Right? Just because you know how to steal something, or know how to induce disease, or know how to steal money, perhaps, that doesn't make you a thief, right? So why do you think he's putting forth a bad argument here? Anybody have any ideas?
I think it's a good point. And I think if you really think about it, I'm not saying the argument is correct, but if you really think about it, like someone who's good at guarding money knows the ins and outs on how to guard money.
Yeah.
So they'd be the best person to steal money because they know how to guard money, how to guard money.
Right, but does that make them a thief?
No.
Just because they have that knowledge? It wouldn't seem so, right?
I think maybe this is like a far stretch, but maybe you can introduce like integrity into it later and say, like, obviously no, just because you're good at guarding money doesn't make you a thief, but to be a just person you have to have that integrity.
He is going to say that you do have to have a certain integrity to be just. Yeah, for sure. I think he's doing something a little bit differently here. Something that we wouldn't notice unless we understood what Socrates' intentions are. So remember who's here having this discussion. There's a bunch of people here. I think there are 12 people here. Okay, Cephalus has left. A lot of them are not mentioned. A lot of them are just listening to the conversation. We have Polemarchus and Thrasymachus. These two people are not citizens of Athens, actually. Polemarchus and Cephalus' father are what are called medics. So they work in the city and they moved into the city, but they're not a citizen of the city. And then Thrasymachus and I think it's Cleitophon, his comrade, these are sophists. Does anybody remember what sophists do? What's their job? It has to do with rhetoric.
Weren't there people who taught the younger people how to use rhetoric in a negative way?
Right. That's Plato's view of it, for sure. Yeah. The sophists were basically a group of people who would sell their services to others. They'd say, hey, you give me some money, I'll teach you how to use words and to win debates. Use rhetoric in perhaps manipulative ways or underhanded ways. Right. Now this is key, because there are also two people in this conversation that haven't spoken yet at Cephalus' house that are the object of Socrates' intentions here. Okay? We have Glaucon, Socrates' companion, and Adeimantus. Historically, these were actually Plato's brothers, so he's writing his own family into the story. But these two men are citizens of Athens, Glaucon and Adeimantus, and they come from prominent families, and like all free men during this time, they're going to be expected to participate in politics in Athens at some point in the near future. Okay? So, I want you to understand what Socrates is doing in this whole text is he's battling for the education of these two kids, these two young men. Okay? He doesn't want them to fall into the hands of the sophists. He wants to be their educator and mentor. Okay? That is one of his primary goals in this whole text, is he's trying to establish himself as their educator, their teacher. Because if he lets the sophists get a hold of them, they're not going to rule the city well, right? They're not going to make good political decisions. They're going to be after making a buck, trying to achieve their own personal desires, not looking after the good of the city. So I think one of the reasons why Socrates is making a bad argument here is he's trying to lure these two young men into the conversation. Okay? Because if they're listening, they'll recognize, hey, this isn't a very good argument here. And he's trying to bait him in into having a big discussion about what justice is. Because who should know what justice is other than the people who are going to rule and make political decisions, right? It's a necessity that they understand the nature of justice. So he's trying to bait these two young men into the conversation. I think that's kind of why he's making a bad argument here. But we also see Socrates doing another thing, okay? What does he say in the second sentence? You probably got that idea from Homer. How does Plato feel? How does Socrates feel about the Homeric ideals? Is he for them or against them?
Aren't the Homeric ideals are traditions, right?
They're kind of like, it's like the traditional Greek morality of the day that privileges physical prowess over intelligence, that privileges glory in battle and violence over conversation and persuasion.
He doesn't think the Homeric ideals are the best course of action.
Right.
He prefers philosophy because it's actually the discourse.
Exactly. Yeah. He's trying to move Greek culture and Greek morality away from the Homeric ideals. So what's he doing here? He's shitting on Homer. Okay? He's saying, look, all these young men are raised on these dumb morals, these dumb norms and ideals based on this guy named Homer. That's leading us astray. In part, that's what got us into this mess that we lost the Peloponnesian War in the first place to Sparta. Right? So he's crapping on Homer. Okay, let's continue on. According to you, Homer and Simonides, then, justice seems to be some sort of craft of stealing. Again, bad argument. One that benefits friends and harms enemies. Isn't that what you meant? Who'd like to be Polemachus for me? I'll be Socrates. Can I have a volunteer? Okay, go for it. Isn't that what you meant?
Wait, where are we at again?
We're at 334b5. So with the line, no, by Zeus it isn't, is where you come in.
No, by Zeus it isn't, but I do not know any more what I meant. I still believe this, however, that benefiting one's friend and harming one's enemy is justice.
Speaking of friends, do you mean those a person believes to be good and useful, or those who actually are good and useful, even if he does not believe they are? And similarly with enemies.
Probably. One loves those one considers good and useful and hates those one considers bad.
But don't people make mistakes about this, so that lots of those who seem to be good and useful aren't, and vice versa?
They do.
So for them, good people are enemies, and bad ones friends.
Of course.
All the same, it is then just for them to benefit bad people and harm good ones?
Apparently.
Yet good people are just, and are not the sort to do injustice.
True.
According to your account, then, it is just to do bad things to those who do injustice.
Not at all, Socrates. It is my account that seems to be bad.
Good. Okay, so what's Socrates saying here? What argument is he giving now?
He's saying how Polemachus is saying how you treat your friends right, your enemies not good. And Socrates is saying how do you even know if they're good people or if they're bad people, and what your judgment's all about, if they're your friends or enemies.
Right, exactly. According to Polemarchus's limited account so far, it would seem that what he's saying is sometimes we should treat good people bad and bad people good. Because we can be mistaken about who our friends are, right? People are often mistaken about who their real friends are and who their real enemies are. And so it would seem that based on Polemarchus's view, we should be just, and what that consists in is harming friends and doing good to enemies. Or to put it another way, to harm real friends and do good to fake enemies or something like that. So people are mistaken in their judgments, right? It's not always easy to tell who your real friends are and if your friends are actually good or actually bad. Okay. It is just then, is it, to harm unjust people and benefit just ones?
Apparently.
Yeah, down just a little bit more. After
That
not
seems better than the other view.
Then it follows, Polemarchus, that it is just for many people, the ones who are mistaken in their judgment, to harm their friends since they are bad for them, and benefit their enemies since they are good. And so we will find ourselves claiming the very opposite of what we said Simonides meant.
Yes, that certainly follows, but let's change our definition. For it looks as though we did not define friends and enemies correctly.
How did we define them, Polemarchus?
We said that a friend is someone who is believed to be good.
And how are we to change that now?
Someone who is both believed to be good and is good as a friend. Someone who is believed to be good but is not is believed to be a friend but is not. And the same goes for enemies.
According to that account, then, a good person will be a friend and a bad one an enemy.
Yes.
So you want us to add something to what we said before about the just man. Then we said that it is just to treat friends well and enemies badly. Now you want us to add to this to treat a friend well, provided he is good, and to harm an enemy, provided he is bad.
Yes, that seems well put to me.
And Socrates here asks a really important question. Should a just man really harm anyone whatsoever? What do you think?
I think yes, a just person can. I remember the conversation in my class yesterday, and it was about if you had to kill one person or torture one person to save $1,000, would you?
Uh-huh.
Just, I think that would be just.
You think that would be just?
Yeah, like a terrorist, like they have a bomb in the city, and they are the ones with the answers, and to get the answers, you really have to torture or kill them.
Okay.
Would that be just to do that? I think we would just do that.
Okay. Let me ask you, what does it mean to harm someone? Socrates is asking here, does a just person harm anyone whatsoever? What does it mean to harm someone? Let's say that somebody gets caught stealing, and we put them in a rehabilitative prison, and a year later they come out, and they don't want to steal anymore, and they don't steal anymore. Were they harmed by being in prison? What do you think?
Maybe their pride.
Maybe their pride. What do y'all think? Were they harmed, or were they made better by being in prison?
I think there's an important distinction here, which is the difference between like harming someone and punishing someone.
Sure.
Punishment, not necessarily harm, because it is a thing to deserve it.
Okay, so maybe not all punishments are harmful, but maybe a lot of punishments can be, right? We would say that. A lot of punishments are harmful. A lot of punishments are heavy-handed, don't actually help people.
I think that in the same breath, it's relevant to say that, so one thief can get rehabilitated and perfectly fine coming out, while the other one can go to the same prison for the same treatment, but has a different psychological effect on them. And psychological mentally, they are harmed.
Okay. Yeah, so that can definitely be the case, right? The reason Socrates is asking this question is because what he is going to end up saying is that justice, true justice, never harms anyone if it's carried out correctly. What justice does is it betters people. That's what justice ultimately is. If you're carrying out justice right, you don't harm anybody. Maybe you punish them, but you better them. You make them a better person. That's what it's going to mean to be just according to Socrates. Justice is building the city and the individual up. It's not harming people.
I think that definition is kind of false because if you take the example of the terrorist with the bomb, how do you not harm a person? How do you rehabilitate someone that you're when the stakes are so high?
That's a great question. You know what Immanuel Kant might say about a situation like that? He might say, look, he was big on reason, okay? He thinks that being rational, using reason is important. And so in some cases he thought capital punishment, killing someone, was not only permissible, but morally obligatory. Why? Because what do you do to a monster or a beast who has lost reason and can't get it back? The just thing is to put them down. What do you think about that?
I agree.
So maybe, in a weird roundabout way, we might be able to say sometimes the just thing is to kill the person. Is that weird? Do we like that or do we dislike that? Maybe you think we should never kill anybody. What do you think? Is it just to kill people sometimes?
Well, then you can also make the argument that, like, so if the alternative to killing somebody is like locking them up for the rest of their lives, it's actually probably more harmful to that person.
To lock them up?
Yeah, it's like the mental health effects of like life imprisonment. If you're like in a jail cell by yourself for, decades, you're obviously gonna have some pretty bad mental health effects from that.
So maybe killing them is like the preferable, more just thing to do
Yes.
than letting them rot in prison?
As far as like harm to themselves, yes.
Okay.
I don't agree with capital punishment, and I think that
Okay, so maybe for you, justice means for some really heinous crimes, the just thing to do is let them rot in a cell. Like if you have somebody who tortures and rapes 10 children, and it's clear that they're not sorry for what they did and they don't want to change, maybe? Yeah.
I feel like there's also been a lot of stories of like people finding peace in jail. So I feel like in some certain situations, like jail can help like change someone, so it ends up being a just punishment because they come out and get changed into a better person.
Socrates would say, if they come out a better person than they went in, then justice was done. Because justice is building people up. It's improving people. What often happens in practice, though, is that justice is not carried out well. And people are made worse by our criminal justice system, for example. Right? Yeah, I'll give you the last word on this.
I would say, especially in like cases of self-defense, there's no way where you can. I think that you have to select who you want to be just to. You want to be just to who you care about, or the criminal. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to choose people you don't care about.
Do you think you can't be just to both of them? Or there are cases where you can't dispense justice to everybody?
Yeah, like there's some cases where you need to choose. It's
Okay.
life or death. It's a split-second decision. And until that time, you're going to choose yourself and who you love. And the legal system will back you.
Okay. Yeah, there are probably some cases like that. Yeah. It's a messy, imperfect world we live in, right? Okay, so keep that conception of justice in mind. Socrates is going to say justice means making people better, making them wiser, making them stronger, more courageous, building them up, improving them. Okay? So should a just man really harm anyone whatsoever?
Of course, he should harm those who are both bad and enemies.
When horses are harmed, do they become better or worse?
Worse.
With respect to the virtue, this is a key word, virtue. Literally, it comes from the Greek arete, meaning excellence. So when you see virtue, think excellence. With respect to the excellence that makes dogs good, or to the ones that makes horses good.
With respect to the one that makes horses good.
And when dogs are harmed, they become worse with respect to the excellence that makes dogs, not horses, good?
Necessarily.
And what about human beings, comrade? Shouldn't we say that when they are harmed, they become worse with respect to human excellence?
Of course.
So here we see Socrates saying, harming people means making them worse, breaking them down. When you harm someone, you make them worse off, and you make them a worse human being. But isn't justice human virtue?
Yes, that's necessarily so too.
Then, my dear Polemachus, people who have been harmed are bound to become more unjust.
So it seems.
Now, can musicians make music to make people unmusical?
No, they can't.
Or can horsemen use horsemanship to make people unhorsemanlike?
No.
Well, then can just people use justice to make people unjust? In a word, can good people use their virtue or goodness to make people bad?
No, they can't.
For it isn't the function of heat to cool things down, I imagine, but that of its opposite.
Yes.
Nor the function of dryness to make things wet, but that of its opposite.
Of course.
So the function of a good person isn't to harm, but that of his opposite.
Apparently.
And a just person is a good person?
Of course.
So, it isn't the function of a just person to harm a friend or anyone else, Polemachus, but that of his opposite, an unjust person.
I think you are absolutely right, Socrates.
So if someone tells you it is just to give to each what he is owed, and understands by this that a just man should harm his enemies and benefit his friends, the one who says it is not wise. I mean, what he says is not true, for it has become clear to us that it is never just to harm anyone.
I agree.
You and I will fight as partners then against anyone who tells us that Simonides, Bias, Pittacus, or any of our other wise and blessedly happy men said this?
I, for my part, am willing to be your partner in the battle.
All right, so there are a few things going on here, right? Again, Socrates is putting forth this idea that true justice means improving people and building them up, okay? But we should think about what that means, and we should think about what harm actually consists in. If you have a friend who is bipolar and is having episodes because they're not taking their medication, would it be just to tell them, it's okay not to take your medication, whatever, you do you? What do you think? Or should you encourage them to take their medication? What would be the just thing to do? What do you think?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, if you have a friend who's suffering from some mental illness and their life is just bad, and some reason why it's bad is they're not taking their medication, should you completely respect their desires and say, hey, you do you, I don't care what you do? Or would the just thing to do say, hey, you should probably take your medication? You know, I think this would be good for you. I'm not talking about force feeding it to them, just like,
Maybe I'd recommend a medical professional and either less dosage or maybe just weaning off of it completely rather than the hard.
yeah, maybe you don't think pills are a good idea anyway, but like, this is important because, look, people have desires all the time, right? Desires that aren't good for them. They do things in their life that isn't good for them, right? Being good to someone doesn't mean completely respecting their autonomy, does it? If they're doing something bad to themselves. If you have someone, let's say they have muscle spasms, and they continually punch themselves in the face. Silly example, but would the just thing be to let themselves keep punching themselves in the face, or to like strap their arm to their body perhaps? What do you think? Maybe the strap? Justice is supposed to be building and improving others up, but that doesn't mean no punishment. That doesn't mean no consequences for their actions. That doesn't mean complete respect for their autonomy as a person and letting them do whatever they want. This is kind of the view that's implied. Do you agree with what Plato was saying here?
So it's kind of like, the doctor for when you go in for a checkup, and if you're overweight, he recommends that you have to do some certain things to not be overweight because of the health, it may hurt your feelings and it may make you a little bit sad, but the truth of the matter is it's better for you to feel a little bit sad and work out your weight issue than to die of a disease or a failure or something.
Yeah, Socrates would say the just thing to do is to tell that person the truth, not to be a dick about it, but tell them the truth and tell them how they can help themselves. Do you all agree with that? Not completely sparing their feelings and not telling them anything, and just say, oh, go on and do what you want to do. What do you think about that?
Yeah, just kind of recommending the better direction to take, but still allowing the person free will to choose whether or not they actually want to pursue that path.
Okay, so there should be some level of respect for personal freedom and autonomy, right? Yeah, I think I would agree.
It's kind of like with the transgender argument, people use if there are certain health risks that you take when you do certain surgeries to yourself, but at the end of the day, you're over 18, there are your choices. If you feel like you're going to be better suited in a certain body type or having certain things, then that is your choice, but there are, risks and benefits and all kinds of different stuff. Isn't that?
I see what you're saying. I like to, when I think about this, I normally think of alcohol, because alcohol is a big thing in our culture. Maybe the just thing to do to an alcoholic isn't to take all of his money in alcohol, but is to help him get into a program or something. Maybe preventing people from acting out what they're going to do, like restraining them completely is unjust, but also not saying anything would also seem to be unjust, or not helping in the ways that you can. This is kind of the view that Plato is putting forth.
With free speech, so like say someone's saying something that's harmful. Is it right to step in and say something, or are you violating that person's right to free speech?
Well, what do y'all think?
I think there's a difference between, like the two examples that you gave, versus suggesting, hey, you should probably take your meds, this would help you, and forcing your arms down. It's the same thing where you can suggest something to somebody, but you shouldn't be able to go up to anyone and be like, you're hitting yourself, that's bad, I'm going to grab you. Because you don't know the full story. But in that case, you can say, hey, what you said wasn't great, but then it's ultimately their decision how to react to it.
Okay. So still respecting personal autonomy in some sense.
In some,
right?
not in all senses, but in some senses, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe if somebody, for example, like the example we saw before, where it wouldn't be just to give an insane person back the gun that they lent you, right? Because they'll kill themselves with it or kill other people. So maybe that's like a fringe case where we're like, I'm not going to give you back what you lent me, right? Because
I think it's a very interesting point because a lot of times when religion is brought up to people in different spaces, they see that as someone's forcing the religion onto them or stuff like that. When in reality, it's just someone just was an opinion to the general public. While on the contrary, whenever it's election time, everywhere you go, you see an ad about the governor, this or that, even in schools, and no one sees that as someone enforcing something on a girl.
okay. So there's a difference, you might say, between exercising, your right to free speech and like following people around and like constantly like saying things to them and never leaving them alone, right? Like if I was trying to convert you to Christianity, like maybe it would be fine if I told you about it out of class, but then I left. But then in another case, if I were to follow you around everywhere, into the bathroom, into the shower, and I'm still like, maybe that wouldn't be cool.
Yeah, I think people are just subjective to what they see as forcing something on a girl. I think they're very picky on this.
Okay, that might be the case. There's a few other things going on here I just want to briefly mention. So, Socrates is trying to make the case that justice never harms anyone. Punishment might be necessary, but if you're dispensing justice correctly, that will help the person, that will improve them. But then he's also comparing justice and injustice and the effects these things have on society. So when you think justice, I also want you to think like properly organized, like orderliness. Okay? In a just society, the people get along, they form relationships, they work together, and they cooperate. Okay? Justice makes people more social. Alright? The same is not true of injustice, Plato would say. If somebody has injustice in their heart, or if there's injustice in a society, that creates factions and divisions. That separates people. It pulls them out of the realm of sociality and into the realm of the unsocial. The mean, the cruel, the divided. So when you think justice, also think orderliness and social. And when you think injustice, think chaos, division, perhaps violence. Okay? So, he says the just person does not harm anyone, they make them better. And then he's got one other little thing that he adds in here, but I'll let you go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, so Polemarchus is democracy, right? Is he also making a point that the just thing to do is not necessarily always going to be what the majority of people want to do, but there's some objective justice just based off of these truths that he's talking about?
I think he would concede that the majority can be wrong. Yeah? Yeah. What's interesting about this whole book is we see the characters representing different forms of government. Polemarchus on up. Polemarchus, Adeimantus, Glaucon, and Socrates. they all kind of shift upwards in Plato's view. They improve through the course of the dialogue. So you might see by the end of this book that actually Polemarchus starts kind of shoving away some democratic beliefs and starts gaining more aristocratic beliefs. Except for Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus does not improve in the dialogue at all. He's the tyrant. Okay? And he thinks he knows what's right and what's moral and what's good. He wants to have things his way. So you're not going to see any moral development on his part. But you will see political and moral development in the other characters. Yeah. And we see Socrates kind of winning Polemarchus over here. Right? He's kind of brought him onto his side a little bit, at least when it comes to this conception of justice. Now, just one more thing I'd like to say. This line is significant. You and I will fight as partners then against anyone who tells us that Simonides, Bias, Pittacus, or any of our other wise and blessedly happy men said this. What's he doing here? Why is he bringing these people into it when he's saying, we will fight against those who say that these wise men said anything differently than we're saying here? What is this symbolic of? Perhaps this question will help you answer it. Does Socrates think the old ways and the traditions are completely useless? No. Here I think he's being charitable to these historical figures. These historical figures were living out the old ways and traditions, but we should still give them the respect that they deserve. Okay? Even if we don't always agree with what they say, and if we think their views might be a little outdated. Now, you may disagree with that, but... Okay, let's continue on. Do you know who's saying, I think it is, that it is just to benefit friends and harm enemies? Whose? I think it is a saying of Periander, or Perdiccas, or Xerxes, or Ismenias of Thebes, or some other wealthy man who thought he had great power.
That's absolutely true.
All right. Since it has become apparent then that neither justice nor the just consists in benefiting friends and harming enemies, what else should one say about it? Now, while we were speaking, Thrasymachus had tried many times to take over the discussion, but was restrained by those sitting near him, who wanted to hear our argument to the end. When we paused, after what I had just said, however, he could not keep quiet any longer. Crouched up like a wild beast about to spring, he hurled himself at us as if to tear us to pieces. There's some stuff going on here, okay? Why do you think Plato is describing Thrasymachus in this way? He's comparing him to a wild beast.
Well, since he doesn't kind of be like the tyrant that vilified him from the get-go.
Yeah. What are tyrants like? Are they nice and loving and respectful? No, they're kind of like animals. The bad ones are like animals, right? They pursue their desires over following reason like a good human does who has a mind, right? They pursue and gratify their desires for drink, for sex, for power, for money, right? They try to impose their will on the world. Isn't this what animals do? If you want to get into Eastern philosophy a little bit, one thing that Taoists and Buddhists will say is that what we should do as humans is just kind of go with the flow, right? Accept life, detach ourselves from it in some sense, not try to impose our will on the world and make the world as we see fit, but just kind of go with the flow of things, roll with the punches. Humans can do this because we have reason. Animals cannot. Animals cannot think, should I kill the other prey animal today? I wonder if that would be a good thing to do. No, the lion chases and kills the gazelle, right? The lion imposes its will on the gazelle. Animals impose their wills on other animals. Animals try to impose their will on the other natural elements in their environment. Okay? So Thrasymachus, being a tyrant, is being compared to an animal here. Plato is saying he has a beastly nature. He's not properly ruled by reason. Okay, he's ruled by his lust for power and money and to impose his will on the conversation. He's trying to butt in, right? Trying to get in. He's animalistic. Okay? He wants things to go his way. And there's something else being implied here. Right? What's more social? Respecting a conversation people are having in your midst, or butting into the conversation and telling them why they're wrong? What's more socially appropriate?
The first one.
Respecting the conversation, right? And not interrupting unnecessarily. Thrasymachus is an unjust man. Okay? His soul is not organized properly with reason at the top. And he's not a very socially appropriate creature. Okay? He's trying to butt into the conversation, interject, impose his will on the conversation. Plato is implying here that on account of his beastly nature, he is not a very social creature. Okay? He's unjust. Thrasymachus, you can kind of conceptualize as an animal. Okay? Pulled this way and that by his desires and instincts. He's not ruled by reason. Socrates, in the rest of this book, is going to play the role as the lion tamer. If Thrasymachus is the lion, Socrates is going to be the lion tamer. He's going to try to bring him back down to a pacified state. Okay? And so Thrasymachus butts in. What nonsense you two have been talking all this time, Socrates. Why do you act like naive people giving way to one another? If you really want to know what justice is, don't just ask questions and then indulge your love of honor by refuting the answers. You know very well it is easier to ask questions than to answer them. Give me an answer yourself and tell us what you say the just is. And don't tell me it is the right, the beneficial, the profitable, the gainful, or the advantageous, but tell me clearly and exactly what you mean. For I won't accept such nonsense from you. Okay. So his response here is kind of authoritarian, right? He's saying, this is the way the conversation is going to go. You're going to give me answers, buddy. Right? So again, indicative of his tyrant, beastly-like nature. But also, it's very interesting what he says in the second line. Why do you act like naive people giving way to one another? What do you think he means by this? Or what is Plato trying to evoke here? How does Thrasymachus see conversation? Does he see it as a back and forth, a give and take? A sharing of information?
He calls them like naive people that they give way to one another, that they actually like consider what the other person is saying and are willing to change their views as a result.
Right. Think about two armies giving way to one another. Right? In Thrasymachus' mind, the strong man crushes his enemies, okay, with force and violence. He conceptualizes conversation itself as a battle. And by giving way to one another, neither of them are really fighting, are they? They're not engaged in a conflict. Thrasymachus sees conversation as a conflict to be won. Okay, he's a rhetorician. He's a sophist. He's trying to use words to one-up people, to get what he wants, to manipulate others. He sees dialogue itself not as something that should be a give and take, not a way to discover the truth, but a battle to be won. Okay? And so he thinks that what they're doing is weakness. They're exhibiting weakness, and he criticizes them for it. He's not interested in having some philosophical discussion about what justice is. He's interested in winning the argument, and he's a very concrete guy, okay? He's a tables and chairs kind of guy, not an airy-fairy philosopher with his head in the clouds, okay? He's a very materialistic person, both metaphysically and when it comes to products, okay? He likes money. Thrasymachus is here to sell his services to the young men. He wants to make money. Right? His words startled me, and looking at him, I was afraid. And I think if I had not seen him before he looked at me, I would have been dumbstruck. But as it was, I happened to look at him just as he began to be exasperated by our argument. So I was able to answer. This dumbstruck word is important. There's a note at the bottom of the page that talks about how in Greek superstition, anyone seen by a wolf before he sees it is struck dumb. Okay? Again, comparing Thrasymachus to an animal, saying he has a beastly nature. And Socrates is a little fearful, right? This guy's aggressive. This guy's combative, right? And this is what he says. Do not be too hard on us, Thrasymachus. If Polemachus and I made an error in our investigation of the accounts, you may be sure we did so involuntarily. If we were searching for gold, we would never voluntarily give way to one another, if by doing so we would destroy our chance of finding it. So do not think that in searching for justice, a thing more honorable than a large quantity of gold, we would foolishly give way to one another or be less than completely serious about finding it. You surely must not think that, my friend, but rather as I do, that we are incapable of finding it. Hence, it is surely far more appropriate for us to be pitied by you clever people than to be given rough treatment. So what is Socrates doing here? Is he being aggressive and reactionary back to Thrasymachus? He's not, right? First of all, he defends what he and Polemachus have been doing in kind of a nice way. He uses reason to justify the conversation they've been having, and he stresses the importance of truth again. But what's more than this is that he's not being combative and aggressive because it is not wise to engage in battle with an animal. Tell me, are any of you going to win a fight against a lion? Or a wolf? Probably not, right? Even a big dog might kick your ass. Right? You don't get into a fight with an animal. What do? You try to pacify it. You try to bring it back down to a level where it's not angry at you and isn't going to try to attack you. Right? And so Socrates actually dishes him out a compliment. It would be surely far more appropriate for us to be pitied by you clever people than to be given rough treatment. Right? Trying to pacify Thrasymachus by complimenting him. When he heard that, he gave a loud, sarcastic laugh. By Heracles, that is Socrates' usual irony for you. I knew this would happen. I even told these others earlier that you would be unwilling to answer, that you would be ironic and do anything rather than give an answer if someone questioned you. So did anybody look up this term irony in the glossary? Does anybody know what Thrasymachus is trying to get at here by calling Socrates ironic? Does anybody have an idea? What does ironic mean in our day and age? What do we mean when we say something is ironic? You've all heard that song, right? Isn't it ironic? What does it mean to be ironic nowadays?
Well, I just look at the definitions on the terms, but like I think to be ironic is kind of be like something I guess you can like relate to, but it's kind of like sarcastic, something like that. And in the book it says irony is like, unlike how we understand it normally, it's like you're intending to deceive someone. So Polemachus is saying Socrates is only trying to deceive people.
Right. In our day and age, irony has something to do with, something happening that you didn't expect. Right? But Thrasymachus here is accusing Socrates of being deceitful when he calls him ironic. And Socrates responds, "That is because you are a wise fellow." Is this a compliment or is he throwing sarcasm back? at Thrasymachus? What do you think? Or is it both? Because remember, Thrasymachus when he heard that, he gave a loud, sarcastic laugh, and now Socrates is saying, "Oh, that's because you're a wise fellow."
I think that Socrates probably meant it in a sarcastic way, but I don't know if I can't pronounce his name, whatever.
You just call him T if you want.
Yeah, I don't think he necessarily has like the competence to understand that he's being sarcastic. So maybe he'll think that it's like, oh, I am a wise man. Right, thanks.
I think that's right. I think the same thing, yeah. I think Socrates is doing both. He knows on the surface Thrasymachus will interpret it as a compliment, but he's really being kind of a sarcastic prick here. Because Thrasymachus is being a prick to him. Okay? That is because you were a wise fellow, Thrasymachus. You knew very well if you asked someone how much 12 is, and in putting the question you warn him, "Don't tell me, man, that 12 is twice 6, or 3 times 4, or 6 times 2, or 4 times 3, for I won't accept such nonsense from you." It was obvious to you, I imagine, that no one could respond to a person who inquired in this way. But suppose he had said to you, "What do you mean, Thrasymachus? Am I not to give any of the answers you mentioned, not even if 12 happens to be one of those things? You are amazing. Do you want me to say something other than the truth? Or do you mean something else?" What answer would you give him? Now what Socrates is doing here is a little bit subtle. Okay? What is a strong strategy to employ when you are debating someone? Do you put all of your views out in front of you and let them critique it? Or do you hold something back? You hold something back, right? And what do you do when you watch martial arts movies, let's say, or shows? What does the wise master always do? Do they strike first, or do they let the opponent strike first? They let the opponent strike first, right? This is what Socrates is doing. He's basically taking a step back. He's kind of disengaging a little bit from this combative discussion. And he's also kind of saying, "Okay, now bring it on." He's taken a step back. He's now in a good defensive position to respond to Thrasymachus. Because he knows he's not just going to win a battle of aggressiveness. Okay? That doesn't mean he's not smarter than Thrasymachus. He obviously is. He's wiser. And as we'll see soon, he has a stronger mastery over language than Thrasymachus does. But he's putting himself in an advantageous position. Okay? What answer would you give him? Well, so you think the two cases are alike? Well, why shouldn't I? But even if they are not alike, yet seem so to the person you asked, do you think he is any less likely to give the answer that seems right to him, whether we forbid him to do so or not? Is that what you're going to do? Give one of the forbidden answers? I would not be surprised. Sorry, my page flipped. Provided it is one that seems right to me after I have investigated the matter. What if I show you another answer about justice? One that is different from all of these and better than any of them. What penalty would you deserve then? Who asks that? Who says something like that? Hey, if I know something that you don't know, what do you deserve to suffer? Huh? Is this how people talk? Is this how we engage with others? This is kind of weird, right? This is crazy. Thrasymachus is a really aggressive guy, right? But he's saying this on purpose, okay? Thrasymachus has something in mind. Remember, he views dialogue as combat. And what is common parlance during this time? When two nations fight one another, to the victor go the spoils, and to the victor go slaves. Right? So he's following his Homeric ideal of thinking and saying, hey, I deserve something if I win this. Okay? And plus I want to make you suffer, Socrates. Now, why do you think he wants to make Socrates suffer? Why does he want to make him look stupid?
Because he was stupid at the time Socrates taught.
He probably doesn't feel that way yet, but he will later. Think about his profession again. Why does he want to make Socrates look stupid?
And if you put the others around you down, it puts you like at a higher perspective.
Exactly, yeah. If he can make Socrates look dumb, then he's going to look good in front of Adeimantus and Glaucon, and maybe they'll pay for his services, and he can make some money. Right? He's traveling from city to city selling the services. Okay? So he asks, if I show you another answer about justice, one that is different from all of these and better than any of them, what penalty would you deserve then? And Socrates has the funniest response in the world. The very one that is appropriate for someone who does not know. What else? And what is appropriate is to learn from the one who does know. That, therefore, is what I deserve to suffer. What does Socrates say his penalty should be? If Thrasymachus can provide a better conception of justice. It's exactly what a philosopher would say. What does he deserve to suffer if he loses?
To learn from suffering.
The pain of learning. Isn't that funny? I think it's funny. Right? He's deflected Thrasymachus's, I don't know what you might call, insult or demand that he be paid something. And he says, well, I would deserve to suffer the pain of learning. What else? And what does Thrasymachus fire back with? What a pleasant fellow you are, but in addition to learning, you must pay money. Remember, this guy is trying to make money, okay? He's a sophist, he's a rhetorician, he's trying to sell his services. The whole reason he's here in Athens, besides to drink and have fun, is to make money. Okay? So he says, no, instead, if I best you, you have to pay money. And Socrates says an even funnier thing than the last thing he said. I will if I ever have any. Why is this funny? Can anybody guess? First, let me ask you, do you think Socrates has any money?
No.
The dude doesn't have any money.
I was going to suggest that maybe he does, since like aristocratic like sort of ideals that he has, like in order to be an aristocrat, you are wealthy.
You might think so, but keep this in mind, okay? Socrates is a philosopher. He goes around Athens having discussions with people. What distinguishes the philosopher from the sophist? The philosopher never charges anything for his discussions. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have a real job. Yeah.
Is he saying that wisdom is more important than money?
Well, definitely he thinks that. Yeah. But the funny thing is, he's never had a real job in his life, Socrates. He spends more time talking to people than with his wife and his kid. Okay? And he's never going to have a real job in his life because he's just going to go around talking to people until he dies. Okay? So he's never going to have any money to give Thrasymachus. So if Thrasymachus wins, Socrates is never going to give him anything. And so he says, I will if I ever get any, knowing full well he's never going to have money to give him.
How does he survive without have a wife, kids?
Benefactors. People who like him, wealthy men in politics and society who like him, give him money and gifts. The dude doesn't have a job because he doesn't charge anything. He's trying to figure out what the truth is, going around talking to people, but he doesn't charge for it. Okay? So, yes, through gifts and through the goodwill of other people is how he survives, he and his family. Maybe his wife has a job, I don't know. But he doesn't have one. Okay? Not a job like we would think. Okay? And of course, what Thrasymachus is asking here is completely emblematic of sophistry, right? The sophists charge for their services, so he demanded that Socrates pay for his services of providing him a better conception of justice. Yeah? And Glaucon chimes in. He has it already if it is a matter of money. Speak, Thrasymachus. We will all contribute for Socrates. And so money talks, and so does Thrasymachus. And so he's going to start talking now. That Glaucon has said, we'll give you the money. We'll put the money forward for Socrates. Oh yes, sure. So that Socrates can carry on as usual. He gives no account himself, and if someone else does, he takes up his account and refutes it. How can someone give an answer, my excellent man, when first of all, he does not know and does not claim to know? And then, even if he does have some opinion about the matter, is forbidden by no ordinary man to express any of the things he thinks. No, it is much more appropriate for you to answer, since you say that you do know and can tell us. Don't be obstinate. Give your answer as a favor to me, and do not begrudge your teaching to Glaucon and the others. While I was saying this, Glaucon and the others begged him to do as I asked. Thrasymachus clearly wanted to speak in order to win a good reputation, since he thought he had a very good answer. But he pretended to want to win a victory at my expense by having me do the answering. However, he agreed in the end and said, that is Socrates' wisdom for you. He himself isn't willing to teach, but goes around learning from others and isn't even grateful to them. So, he's throwing an insult his way. But he's also accusing Socrates of never teaching anybody anything. So let me ask you, do you think that's true? What do you think teaching is? What does a good teacher do?
I think that he teaches everybody by asking questions and then things, making them critically think about things and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's teaching, is making people think critically about works and questions.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, like, wasn't he like slowly like getting like Telemachus to his side? Like, not Telemachus, the Philosophist or whatever his name was. Wasn't
Yeah,
he slowly-
Polemarchus and Cephalus, yeah.
Exactly. Weren't they like having the discussion about justice, and Telemachus was like slowly understanding or like slowly starting to grasp what he was saying and stuff like that, like sort of like teaching him, like, this is, you have your own opinion, but here's a better reasoning for it, like just like teaching him that way, like educating him and think more critically, like she was saying.
Yeah? Yeah.
Like he says, he's not willing to teach but goes around learning from others, but like in the process of the conversation of him learning, he's also inadvertently teaching in a way. So like maybe he is teaching but not necessarily consciously like a lecture.
Right. Right, exactly. I think you all are spot on. Now, I'm a little biased because I'm a professor and I have my own pedagogy. But my goal in class, even though I lecture sometimes, and even though I say things to you as if they're definitive, my goal in class is never to provide you what I think is an accurate picture of reality. It's to open you up to new ideas and perspectives, and to engage your critical thinking skills. Okay? I think that's what makes a good teacher a good teacher. If they can get their students to think. If they can, further their students' capacities to think. Okay? Anybody can tell you how the world works, but if you're not going to think about it, then you're just a pawn in somebody else's game. Right? You're a puppet, and somebody else is pulling your strings. If you just take on somebody's view. So I think Socrates is teaching people. He's not doing it in the way Thrasymachus thinks teaching works. But clearly Polemarchus learned something in the last conversation.
Could that even go like to say something about Thrasymachus' character of like the back and forth not constantly teaching, that since he's more authoritative, that this is what I say, so learn it.
Yeah.
His idea of learning, I tell you, you take it.
Exactly. I tell you what to think and do, and you accept it and do it. That's what teaching is. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not how Socrates operates. And arguably, we might say Socrates' method is better. Right? So Socrates continues. When you say I learn from others, you are right, Thrasymachus. But when you say I do not give thanks, you are wrong. I give as much as I can, but I can give only praise since I have no money. And just how enthusiastically I give it, when someone seems to me to speak well, you will know as soon as you have answered, since I think you will speak well. And now this is important. Thrasymachus gives us his conception of justice. Listen then. I say justice is nothing other than what is advantageous for the stronger. Well, why don't you praise me? No, you are unwilling. So he gives his answer, and then he claps for himself. He's like, oh, my answer is the best. Why don't you praise me? Right? Now let me be a little bit clearer about what Thrasymachus is saying. Thrasymachus is saying, justice is a matter of law, and it's a matter of who's in power. Whoever is in power decides what justice is. Okay? That's Thrasymachus' view. He thinks morality and politics are separate. Doing good, doing the right thing, and justice are separate things. Okay? Justice is just whatever the ruler of the society decides, or the rulers. In other words, advantageous for the stronger. This is going to be the opposite of Socrates' view. Okay? Thrasymachus thinks morality and politics are separate endeavors. Socrates thinks, ideally, they're one and the same. Being a good ruler means being a good person. Okay? You cannot be a good ruler unless you are a good person. And to rule well, you have to be good. You have to do good things. You have to do just things, things that improve and build others up. Okay? What Thrasymachus is providing here for us is a prefiguration of what Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, is going to popularize in his book, The Prince, where he says justice and morality are two separate things, and if you want to be a political person, what you need to do is seek power, and you need to know when to selectively be bad and good. You need to know how to deceive others. You need to know how to manipulate others if you want to be an effective ruler. You need to know how to be as sly as a fox and as violent as a lion. Okay? This is what we might call real world politics. Right?
Well, with what's his name again? The guy who is his office.
Thrasymachus?
Yeah. With Thrasymachus' take on it. Wouldn't that fall in line with democracy? Because if you're separating politics from morality, from your own morality, then you wouldn't make laws and legislations based off your own morality. You
Right.
would base it off politics. And democracy, oftentimes, I mean, what Socrates wanted was he wasn't a fan of democracy.
Yeah, he wanted a few wise rulers at the top, an aristocracy.
Yeah, so I think that in that scenario, the other guy's right, this office is right, because it's politics, and basically you're a servant of the people, so you have to do what the people want, even if that goes against your own morality.
Do you think you should do what people want or what's good for the people?
I think you should do what the people want, because what you might think is good for the people might not be what the people deem as good for themselves. And when you do something for the common good, that can be seen as tyrannical. I mean, look at China.
It
They
could be.
censor stuff for the common good, but it's
Yeah.
also subjective because what we deem as the common good, they don't, and vice versa. So I think just having an open playing field for everyone, where the people choose what they want to be better, so that way everyone has free will to do whatever they want to.
In Plato's ideal society, this isn't a problem we'll have to worry about, because the philosopher kings will know what's best for people, because they're wise and they have knowledge. So they'll know what the people need and what's good for them better than the people will. And actually, we might think there's some truth to this. Does the average person know what they want?
I
To a degree, maybe, yeah.
Are you saying that what the majority of people want is what society should always do?
No.
Oh.
I'm saying that you should still give it to them.
So like what if, like, look in the United States, like, the majority of people want slavery, right? That doesn't make that right.
I don't think people want slavery.
Of course they, yeah, of course they did. That's why it existed for so long. But that's why,
Oh,
that's why we have a thing in the country that's majority rule of minority rights. Because there are like a certain things that even if the majority of people think something should be taken away, that doesn't necessarily mean you should take away like somebody's rights.
So let's say that happens, right? And the majority of people want something, but the ones with enough or the government believes that this is not right, and they do something quite contrary with the law. Wouldn't that be tyrannical?
Not if it has to do with someone's basic human rights, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
So like if the majority.
Look here, let's connect this back to morality and politics. Do you think morality and politics should be intertwined? What do you think? What were you going to say?
To what you had said, I was going to say that I think we know what we want, but we don't always know what it is that we need. And
Oh, okay.
I absolutely think that morality goes into politics. I wouldn't.
Or it should, maybe?
Yeah, I wouldn't want somebody who is immoral to make decisions for me.
That's fair. Here's what Thrasymachus is going to say. And this is another thing you need to know about the philosophers and the sophists, okay? Socrates and the philosophers generally think morality is real and objective, okay? There are right actions and there are wrong actions, and that is not dependent on anybody's personal desires or feelings, okay? The sophists are what you would call moral relativists. They think there is no objectively right and wrong action. It's probably just a matter of taste. Okay? Some people like murder, some people don't like murder. Some people say you should do this or should do that, but they're just talking about their feelings, and there is really no objective right or wrong thing to do in any situation. This lines up neatly with Thrasymachus' conception of justice, because he considers politics basically just to be a product of nature. And in nature, is there any morality? Does the lion do something immoral when it kills the gazelle? No. Right? In nature, there are winners and losers. And the powerful win. Thrasymachus has the same conception of justice. In politics, there are winners and losers. And so what is just is what is decided by the winners. Okay? Okay. So think about that. Ask your friends if they agree with that, if they like that conception of justice. In any case, we'll continue on next week, okay? Have a good weekend, everybody.